Welcome everybody to this Creative Zone webinar. Today's session is the Metaverse and the digital world. We have with us Jawad Ashraf and Carl Clays. Jawad is the CTO and co-founder of Terra Virtua, a marketplace for non-fungible tokens and NFTs. He's an investor in successful mobile application companies and has been in the VR space since inception, releasing titles on every platform. Carl is the founder of iAdvisory and a strategic advisor, board member of several organizations across the globe, pioneering the digital economy. In addition, he leads the digital economy, AI, and fintech initiatives for the Dubai Capital Club Business Innovators Committee, from where he's sitting today. But I've seen a lot of the work that you've been doing, Carl, on this. Congratulations, and Jawad, of course, for the amazing work that you've been doing. And then again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
So just to get started, I mean, let's do an introduction into the metaverse, this new world that is poised to be a $1 trillion marketplace. I think for those that are in the call, I think they understand a little bit sort of the transition that we went through from Web 1.0 to 2.0, 1.0 being, you know, the Google of the time and what that did only for people using the internet. 2.0 with everything that social media brought, and the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams, and now we're entering into this new phase of the meta world. Tell us a little bit, what is it that we are experiencing right now? Jawad, maybe we can get started with you, and then Carl, you can pick up from those comments.
I think basically this is going to be the biggest paradigm shift since the days of all computing being on massive desktop computers. And that big shift that moved people away from that desktop where they were tethered to the desk to mobile applications where they could actually use the applications anywhere, and then mobile. The metaverse is that next step in liberation. It's going to allow people to create new economies. You know, just as you've got the ability right now, if you look at mobile and you look at web, brand new economies were created across the world, and new companies surfaced as innovators and leaders. And what you're going to see with the metaverse, you know, it's a metaverse is going to be like, I always like to describe it as internet on steroids. It's a very, very, very immersive place. It's where Carl will talk to you about AI and avatars. I won't even touch on those because I know he loves to talk about those. But it's going to be a place where you can actually go, you can transact, you've got much higher level of interaction, but you've already are seeing new types of entities, structures being created that are generating massive amounts of money. And right now, the mainstream audience is completely unaware of what's happening. You know, there are companies that make revenues of over $300 million a month, and most people don't even know who they are. So the metaverse is a gateway to a brand new type of economy with a new type of consumption, and it needs a new type of education before businesses can start capitalizing on it. And it really is a case of the train has already left the station. So I'll stop talking.
And usually it's those early movers, the ones that take the full advantage of things, right? Is this like right at the beginning, and now is the perfect time to get in and really understand what would be the niche in which you could potentially get involved in?
An anecdote that I like to make is that when we built Terra Virtua, we built it 2.5 years ago, and it was VR and a metaverse and NFTs. And then we went to market and realized no one understood what any one of these three things meant to anyone. So then we took the NFT part out and focused on that as a marketplace, and we launched Metaverse Spaces 2 years ago. So essentially, right now, you see a lot of people like Meta brought it into the forefront. And what we literally did is now that we know that there's more awareness, we're launching our Metaverse Spaces within a few months properly. But it's something that people have been talking about, but no one's really understood, or at least wanted to understand, until this year. And that was with Mark Zuckerberg pulling the trigger. And as soon as he did that, that was a racing gun now, and everyone's scrabbling. Literally, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of metaverse companies, and for every 100 there'll be maybe 5 or 6 of substance.
But Carl, the metaverse on itself is nothing new. It's something that was existing there. We had some of the gaming companies already exploring that with what Minecraft had been doing for years now. How do you feel has happened in the last 6 months, 8 months, or even in the last 1 or 2 months since Facebook announced changing their direction into being this meta company now?
Yeah, look, it's an evolution, but it's an accelerated evolution that's actually happened. So yeah, absolutely. If you look at the young generation, just look at our kids, right? They've been playing Roblox, they've been playing Fortnite, obviously Minecraft for years. But that has its own metaverse virtual experience, which they've been experiencing and going through. And more of late, they obviously have been spending a lot more time buying skins, but also high rendered skins. And so the valuations of these skins are sort of, very important because it's quite cool. But what's more important, I think, is if you want to sort of take everything that Jawad said, which I absolutely agree, A to Z, is that a quick way to sort of see what the future may hold or will hold through the metaverse is just watch the movie Ready Player One. Absolutely. I think it came out about 18 months ago. And when you start to sort of understand the ecosystem that is involved behind that experience, and it is called the Oasis in the movie, but I'm not going to spoil it. Point being is that we're living today in a hybrid realm. So we're actually starting to experience by using technology like VR, the Oculus headsets, and going into these chat rooms. In some cases, you can go to a cinema and visit and watch a movie with someone halfway around the world and talk to them, and not physically yet share popcorn, but who knows in the world in the future what they may bring. But the point being is we're living a hybrid realm. It's a immersive experience. The evolution of the internet, sort of what you alluded to earlier, is we started Web 1.0, right, which was Netscape, the search and the read format. We went into Web 2.0, which was read write, essentially, the evolution of Facebook and contributing to that world. We're living in a decentralized Web 3.0 experience at the very tip of this huge iceberg that's gonna come through, and that's all around decentralization, and that's all around communities owning that virtual world experience and defining what that may be. So we're already sort of starting to understand aspects of that. We don't quite really know where that could end up, but I think when you start to visualize those experiences that I just mentioned, and so you get a virtual sense of the connected world, I'd say probably a little bit more, the train hasn't left the station. I'd say the spaceship has actually just taken off. So,
and one thing that I'd like to pick up on is that one phrase that Carl used in that, it's just a simple sentence. You can own something in the metaverse. That's the single biggest differentiator between World of Warcraft, Roblox, all of these other products. When the company goes pop, or if they're closed down, you've lost those assets forever. The key thing, and this is the thing that really the metaverse is a place, and the NFTs that you hear about are your stuff that you own in that place. Now, the metaverse now means that your assets are separate, worth something, can generate revenue, and are portable within the metaverse. In the old days, if World of Warcraft, the model is very similar. You're there, you have skins, you've got lifestyle, you've got engagement, there are 3D spaces, there are different visual setups, but fundamentally you're a slave to the corporation and the infrastructure. Now you're not. So now you could buy something over here and use it over here. Like for example, in Terra Virtua, we've got like a game that's launched in December, and they're launching the product, and it's Nitro, and it's a racing game, and it's like Need for Speed, and it's play to earn, which is a whole thing worth talking about. But essentially, they can buy the cars on our marketplace, view them in our metaverse, but then take it out and race it on the racetrack in their metaverse. The metaverse isn't just going to be one place. It's like islands. So you go on holiday, some people want to go to the States, some people want to go trekking in the mountains in Nepal, some people want to go to Dubai, but like they're all islands, and that's what I think the metaverse is going to be. But you can literally move your assets yourself or your your things between metaverses, and that's the fundamental biggest change between that and now.
Absolutely.
Now, is there some sort of way of interconnectivity between all these metaverses and these spaces? Because one of the key things here that people don't know is which direction shall I go? There's many people building spaces and metaverses, and you got Facebook and you have Microsoft building its own thing. How do we choose? How does the user know in which direction to go to?
Carl, you want to do that?
All the above. So the way you got to look at it is, in the physical world today, we choose to live in cities, right? So we're living right now in Dubai, the three of us, but we choose that because of its safety, security, opportunity, just the whole lifestyle. You will make those same decisions in the virtual world and these metaverses, depending on what it is that you like to experience. Now, the interconnectedness at the end of the day is all blockchain driven. So, and that's the heart of it all. So and I use this word all the time, which probably end up being a catchphrase, traverse the metaverse. So you're going to traverse from one to the other based on the experiences they provide. And so you've got, obviously in the enterprise, Microsoft's made that play. They're shaping the organization towards a offering in the metaverse for the enterprise, right? You're looking at Facebook with obviously its evolution of its name to Meta, but that's coming from the consumer, that's coming from the social world. But there has to be a way where you can come in, and that's where the blockchain evolution is evolving. So you've obviously got the layer 1 technology, but you've got the layer 2 above that, which allows you to integrate. It's going to take time. It's not happening overnight, but those are the experiences that people are going to look for.
And a lot of it is, people are busy building the metaverses, but there are other companies, just like we have in the physical world, who see as an opportunity by building portability on-ramps between them. So just as I gave the example of the car in Nitro, we made sure that our metaverses were compatible. And it's not just about one item being compatible with another metaverse. Does it have the same fidelity? If one place that you go to is like Legoland, just block, and the other one's a high fidelity 3D experience, does it make sense to even try to move them across? I think that metaverse will be broken into categories, high fidelity and this type, and people will move around there only because they don't want to go over here. But like all of this, it's like metaverse companies aren't really focused on building bridges between other metaverses. They want you to come to theirs. It's other people that are going to build these bridges, and it's a massive opportunity. So if someone out there wants to incorporate a company with you guys and get cracking on that one, it's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I like to suggest to all our attendees to start sending your questions through. You can post them here on the Q&A section box or on the chat function. I'll be reading a few as we go along. I'll be picking them as they relate to some of the topics that we are discussing. Now, how does this translate to business people? You know, we have a lot of startups and entrepreneurs on this call. A lot of them creative zone clients. Where does the opportunity lie for startups and entrepreneurs? Where is the main race taking shape? Aside of the Microsofts and the Meta and the Facebook, where can people, entrepreneurs, take an opportunity of this new world?
Yeah, look, maybe I'll jump in a little bit here. I mean, the opportunities firstly are endless. That's the first thing. But what I would think about is, okay, what's the future consumer going to look like? And which sector and industry am I in today? So if you may or may not have heard this morning, there was an announcement that McDonald's Corporation has just filed a patent for a McDonald's in the metaverse for virtual experiences, ordering, delivery, that kind of thing. And that's a food and beverage firm, right? Global leader. So you now break that down into a local aspect. You start to think about, how do I partner to provide my services and experiences in that world? But how do I showcase myself as being relevant? So brand relevance is going to have some kind of attachment to this online virtual metaverse experience. Now, it may well be that you would have, obviously we've seen the big names. Yes, we've seen Nike and others go out and say we're now developing these NFT stores in the metaverse. We're now going to put in obviously digital formats of shoes in that tokenized NFTs with high render. for that sort of experience. But really, it's beyond that. You start to think of, okay, if I'm looking at government right now is starting to move, and you heard the UAE Ministry of Health move one of their customer happiness service centers into a metaverse experience. How do you provide those experiences to your customers, right? Now, there is a difference, obviously, at the smaller end versus the larger end, but in between, you still want to think about those experiences with your clients and your customers in whatever sector you're in. So as an example, I think if I look at fashion, obviously is an easy one to target. It's not about obviously dressing up and sort of going in and buying skins and having a brand associated just to a skin, an NFT skin in the metaverse. It's about how do I take that back out of there and link it to my physical store? And how do I reward? And the reward mechanism is the key. I'm incentivizing people to come to there. So as an example, I know of one takeaway food and beverage outlet which has actually put their menu on OpenSea's NFT marketplace, tokenize the menu and incentivize people. If they buy that NFT, they'll be entitled to 50% off a range of food on that menu for a period of whatever many packages that they've actually put in there in terms of volume. So that's like a little example there. If I think of the world of tokenization, the whole world of loyalty changes. So, if I'm talking about your clients, I'm looking at Creative Zone. Obviously, I'm actually one of those clients, but I think that's where you need to think forward thinking. Now, if I think medium to larger entities, what is my future valuation going to look like if I don't have a metaverse experience, or I'm offering or a partnership around this space? Because I think future valuations of companies will also have a metric related to, do you offer those experiences in the same way that we've all gone through this digitalization experiences across industry? The same will probably apply, because the future consumer is that young consumer that's expecting that.
And also one thing worth mentioning, and this is an important point for the audience, is that just as a consumer wants different experiences, the consumer nowadays is much, much more conscious about their digital identity. So people like Facebook and Microsoft, their metaverses are really for people who are okay with that. But if you look at it, like there's literally a line, and anyone under that is now very, very wary of it. Really, like generations like mine, I like convenience trumps data ownership. I just want convenience. But now the younger generation, they don't want to do that. And that means that Meta and these other platforms aren't really a good fit for them, because they don't want to surrender that data. So now there are new things happening in crypto. For example, like there's a company called True ID and a few others, and what they do, Crucible, and what they do is that they allow you to do your KYC once, and then they tokenize your KYC. So they do AML identity and everything else. And in crypto projects, basically your login is related to your secure ledger wallet. And then in the future, if you want to know that this person is real and KYC'd, they can basically reach out to that other company and get a token which says, I vouch for this person. So they get to have identity, and they get the security for e-commerce transactions in the metaverse without giving up any of their identity information. Right now, all of the internet, that's what it's all about. Give up your email, give up your name. This entire generation doesn't want to do that. And this is another reason they're just going to be embracing this.
But is this what the future consumer aspires to? That they are okay with the fact of, because having this avatar traversing the metaverse on his behalf that needs to be certified and has to be very openly sort of seen in terms of who this person is, in terms of data, this is a direction that it has to go to in order for this system to work. Is the sort of the consumer ready for something like this?
Remember when the first iPhone came out? People were used to using, Blackberries and tapping away. The whole concept of a screen and doing something like that. A lot of people were like, no, this makes no sense. But at the end of the day, utility drives everything. And if in the metaverse you can find a financial advantage, a better business experience, a better entertainment experience, that's where people will gravitate. Without killer apps, nothing works. If you have a mobile console, if you've got like a new console, the console doesn't sell until there's a killer app. And when there's a killer app in the metaverse, that becomes your trigger for everything going that direction. Right now, we're laying foundations. And a lot of people are making a lot of money. It's a bit like the Wild West, but then so were the early days of e-commerce.
Yeah. There's a few good questions coming through. I'm going to start reading some so that we start engaging with the audience as well. It says, are there new evolving risks in the metaverse in terms of data, virtual asset safety, hacking, social engineering, and what's being put in place to combat this? Maybe Carl?
Yeah, so if funny enough, this has become sort of front and center now in terms of policy consideration and regulation. So I'm actually chairing in 2 weeks an actual solutioning session around policy, law and order, recommendations, and we're bringing entire sort of industry together on this here at the Capital Club. What's coming out at the end of the day is it goes back to your identity, and you think of your general data protection today. The cyber law that's been issued recently, which in this market here is meant to protect at certain levels and certain sort of feeds. But when I start to think of literacy in this world, and I think I'll break it down this way, there's 8 billion people today on Earth. Half of those people, 4 billion, are currently online, which is us, which we are literate in the Web 2.0 experiences and that world. We're still going through the mechanisms of cybersecurity and protection of our data. And what we've given up free of charge, as I think Gerard mentioned earlier. So we're still trying to learn that. Now, there's another 4 billion to come online who actually have not even yet experienced the internet. So we break it down and say, okay, if I sort of look at the global engagement in this Web 3.0 world, the metaverse world we're talking about, NFT world, and all the gaming space, I'd say it's barely sort of 1% from a literacy and engagement. So you need policy to support the protection of your credentials in some way, in some capacity. So we're exploring that as we speak. I think whether you choose to give it up, but today we have these forms that we fill in when we download an app, location, giving away our location, giving away access to our cameras, to everything else, but we don't actually read them because they're so long. We just go accept, right? And so you need to have a mechanism where and here's where I look at the metaverse. It's a great equalizer of ages. You got the elderly generation who are, Gen X and above, and you got the young Gen Z millennials, and all of them are in the same boat. We're all in the same boat at the same time trying to learn this world. But you got to understand that does have a role to play in terms of regulation. I think big tech has, they've trudged their way through Web 2.0 in different ways and sort of taught us these experiences. We as individuals now realize that digital assets have a huge value in this market. Today, it's about $2 trillion. And who knows, the way I look at it is my ID, if I carry a national ID of a country, which today, let's assume today I actually own the Emirates ID credential. Why not have my credential populated with a digital form of currency, which allows me to then transact in the metaverse? But it's under a mechanism which is obviously governed under entities that are regulated with, let's say, within the UAE, but who knows, it could be within the GCC, could be part of a global agreement, much the same way as GDPR over in the EU has sort of done. So I think that's going to be fundamental to success and adoption over the short term.
And one point that was in there as well as social engineering. And one of the things that you find is that right now we've gone from, on the internet, regulation is done via corporates. And that was, and you have to have regulation, because without regulation, things become a cesspit very quickly. Linden Labs created the first PC-based proper metaverse, and it just became a dark place, because without any form of regulation, people have got a tendency to go to negative places. At least you've seen that historically. Now, new type of thing in the metaverse and in crypto generally, which is called a DAO. And a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. This is a group of people who will make a decision on behalf of a project. And this is where, for these metaverses, for them to succeed, you have to have a layer of self-regulation via DAOs. But in ways where people have that regulation, but they're not dictated to by the agenda for an organization. So that social engineering piece is going to be interesting, but it will have its own swings and roundabouts. I mean, it doesn't mean a DAO is any smarter than anybody else. Recently, a DAO went and bought a copy of Dune as an NFT for 3.6 million, thinking they could make NFTs of the movie from it. And then they just realized they bought a book for $3.6 million, which they can't do anything with. So it's lots of new challenges are going to come out in this, but social engineering is going to be a key thing for its survival.
Totally.
That's a good next question that we can raise. What are some of the mistakes that we see some of the corporations or even the middle type of companies doing? I mean, we've seen a surge of NFTs, you know, from monkey faces to people selling land and other things in other projects. How safe is it to invest in these things, expecting a sort of a return out of these things? What are some of the mistakes that we're seeing happening right now?
I mean, you go for it, Gerard. You go for
it. Basically, the first thing is that if you invest in anything from a potato to a car to a piece of fine art, you're always running a risk. When you actually have something which has an incredible value or potential doubling or tripling of return, there's a reason that you're going to get a doubling or tripling of return. It's because there's a new risk associated with that you wouldn't get with a savings bond. So people do need to be careful. They do need to do their research. I mean, even though crypto is inherently secure in the way that it works and is public, there are at least 40 ways a crypto project can do what they call a rug pull, which is essentially where they run away with the money in some shape or form. But that's sort of to be expected, you know, like fly-by-night e-commerce companies, someone on Facebook promising you to do something, someone on Kickstarter where you invest into a project and you get nothing back. You just have to be careful in what you do. I mean, Carl, maybe you've got a view on it as well.
Yeah, look, and it's transparency, but it's through various mechanisms. I think one thing that is in favor of understanding or getting a bit of a community, let's just say, recommendation is that every project, yes, is on Discord, it's on Telegram, it's on Twitter, so there's a huge amount of information coming through that. You need to obviously be proactive in engaging to understand, you know, what are the real metrics behind these projects, and take away the NFT concept of, you know, Bored Apes. Obviously, it's a trend, and there's going to be a celebrity aspect to that. There's going to be a you know, let's just say an association of brand towards that. I mean, if you look at even Visa, I think bought a CryptoPunk months back. So everyone's trying to get into this space, but that's, you know, that's sort of to say we're present. However, if I'm going to sit there and say, is it a value? Well, I mean, today, if I take the just the virtual land opportunities, there's $350 million worth of virtual land that was sold in Sandbox alone last year. That's 65,000 transactions. That's Sandbox. That's one metaverse virtual land. Now, market determines value at the end of the day, but the substance and utility value is the key. And I think, you know, we today, I guess we buy clothes and we buy shoes because it's of value to our physical world experience. And maybe it's also a way of sort of presenting who we are. In the metaverse, it's the same concept. You know, NFTs have a certain value to certain people. Some people say, well, hang on, that digital piece of art, what? You know, the Beeple one that sold for 60, I mean, that's the big headline. There is a way of I guess, building up attention and drawing the masses. But the real opportunity here is gamification and anything to earn. I'll use that term. Because, you know, we talk about play to earn. There is many other opportunities. There is, you know, there is some projects, learn to earn. There is concepts around, playing to give, the whole giving world. So there's a really exciting world behind earning while you're investing. And then one thing we haven't even talked about is the traditional financial world today. Banks today ask us to keep our physical fiat money in the bank, which sits in a bank account. In some cases, people get a bit of interest out of that. Or you may put your fiat currency into equity markets, and you're hoping to get some growth in a real tech company or a real Dow index rated company or in an ETF. Well, in this world, there's something called staking. So, you could buy a DAO or a token for a specific project. It could be Axie Infinity. It could be a Terra Virtua token in Jawad's case. And you can stake. And staking means that if you keep it in that project, there's returns of upwards of 30 to 40% in some projects. Ethereum is doing this in their next release. And so you would argue, where would I really want to get a return? Because today, if I'm leaving fiat currency and I'm not saying for everyone to go do that, but I'm saying we need to be aware and educated. And being incentivized to be educated, I think is going to be huge as well. So, yeah.
I think, Jawad, you had a few points to add to this.
At the end of the day, a lot of Carl's points were just absolutely on point. There's so many opportunities in this particular space. There's so many new types of economy that are going to be created. And a lot of them, we don't even know what they are yet. We've seen the beginning, learn, play to earn is there now. And learn to earn is also there. Just to give the audience, most of them probably will not have heard, make an assumption about what play to earn is. But for example, Axie Infinity, which we mentioned, this allows people to buy these NFTs. Let's say you buy 3, and then the other person buys 3. Then you fight, and the person who wins will end up earning this token, SLP, Secret Love Potion. You can then convert that for money. And in the Philippines, just doing that took people out of poverty. Hundreds of thousands of people were earning more money than they were earning in the day-to-day businesses' lives, places where they can be regularly exploited. You've got people who own brick factories and fringes of these countries who their whole families become indentured servants. So they're actually allowed to go ahead and have an opportunity and to make money. And then this new thing that happened was that when inflation started happening, the NFT started going up in price. It created yet another new type of entity called a guild, where an organization started buying up these NFTs because they had money, and then allowing people in these other developing countries to apply to become a scholar, to borrow those NFTs, to play the game, to earn money, and then do a rev share. Now think about both of these things. These didn't even exist as ideas a few years ago. And this is a massive, massive economic shift. And this is just in gaming. You're gonna have this in terms of asset creation. You're gonna have types of borrowing and lending, leverage of assets. You had your first metaverse mortgage this week. You're gonna see some very interesting economy. And every one of these points is a monetization point for a company that can figure it out and get in there now.
Absolutely. We have a question from Jorge. He's saying, are NFT domains going to be used in the metaverse and in Terra Virtua, in your case, Jawad? For example, I own a few such as DubaiVerse.crypto and MonsterDrome.nft, etc. Is this a space that he should continue exploring?
If it was me, I wouldn't bother, because look, ultimately the mobile browser will be the jump-on point to the metaverse, and there's nothing more valuable than a .com. A lot of people have moved to .ios, and then after that, nothing really matters. You have co.uk's and you've got .aes, but it's just an entry point. And what will really make the metaverse successful? It's for it not to be niche. And for it not to be niche, it's got to be something that everyone realizes and identifies with. And that's .coms, that .co.uk's. It's just regular domain. So, Jorge, don't bother. You're not going to make any money out of this one.
Good. Christian is asking, can we put 3D NFTs in a room where other people can see it in AR? I'm thinking
Funnily enough, this is exactly what we've been doing for 2 years. We've got 3D NFTs with millions of polygons in high fidelity in virtual spaces that you can then see on your mobile phone. So, for example, we licensed we're a partner with Legendary Pictures, and when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, we got the special effects footage from the movie to create 3D Godzillas and Mechagodzillas, and that you could walk in and see in a 3D space. And then you had people who were making TikToks of having Godzilla terrorize them, and then having Godzilla in the living room in AR. So that stuff's already happened. Well, by us, but a lot of people are just starting to do that now. But for something to really work, I mean, it's got to work in AR, it's got to work in 3D, and it's got to work on a flat screen as well. You've got to have every single digital touch point, I think, for it to work.
Carl, something from your side on these points. I'm currently freaking out on some of the descriptions that are happening and how, you know, these new worlds are being created. And I think 90% of us on this call are realizing we're not into this. We're not in this yet. And either we get into it or we're going to miss out.
So I co-authored a white paper on economics and AI in the metaverse about 6 months ago, and it's under peer review. One of the areas that actually stood out in my perspective and my co-author's perspective is time. How much time do we have in the physical sense? So we have 24 hours in a day, right? How much time can you actually allocate to being physically or engaged mentally into this world, right? So I would argue, you know, you have a couple of hours a day at best, if you take everything aside, you know. So now you start to think, okay, what is an avatar? And so we're seeing, yes, the concepts of avatars of someone representing or a pseudo-anonymous digital twin of me in this world, participating in some room or some meeting, but I still have to be physically engaging. Where it gets really interesting is when you plug in AI and you say, what if my personal avatar while I was asleep actually traverse the metaverse based on my interests and habits? So if I have an interest in buying virtual land, I have an interest in digital assets of a certain project portfolio, it could be gamification, whatever. And so I wake up in the morning and I get a dashboard view that my avatar has done this, and that based on and this is under my control, right? This is not under any other's, it's my control. And then I make a decision to say, okay, great. Well, that's, you know, so I now have my total focus time in the physical world, right? Whilst so now you're starting to look at two economies. Now we're looking at an unmeasured digital economy versus what we're measuring right now in terms of GDP and standard economics. So to me, when I look at this opportunity in terms of an avatar, I look way beyond, because I think that's where we're going to go at some point. It's automation. It's something that takes and gives us back time. That's really what it's about, because if we have to physically be engaged, it becomes, but that's down the track.
And leading on from that, look, it also brings new types of opportunities.
Yeah.
So you're gonna mute Jawad.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing is, like, there's new types of opportunities that exist in the metaverse for different things, even learning. For example, there's a company here called Disruptive Focus, which is trying to disrupt everything in terms of learning and HR regionally based. And what they do, for example, is they have metaverse classrooms. So they provide training. So let's just say that you've got people in your audience who are really, really interested in learning about crypto and all of this. This company provides courses, and that's, you know, companies provide courses, but they provide metaverse spaces where people can come and engage in classes with anonymity, which means that you'd be really surprised to see that when people don't have ego in their way and you're using avatars, like in the metaverse, all of a sudden, people are engaging in a brand new way. They're asking questions they'd be too embarrassed to otherwise. And that's another key thing about this whole area in the metaverse. People's behaviors will also change because their avatars are going to reflect a look and also provide them a level of, people will be able to share the layers of identity that they want to share. So that was an example of like innovation in the space. And this again is something we're going to see, new economies.
Now, where I see all of this going is we are definitely going to be living in these two different distinct worlds. And Jawad, throughout the call, I could see how you are on one side answering emails and in your Terra virtual world, and you are talking to people and other things, and you are halfway on this side. I mean, it's going to end up being like this, right? We're going to live these different lives in different spaces.
Yeah, well, my wife has a big problem with that. So this is something where we do have to just put down your phone and give unadulterated time to certain things in certain scenarios. But yeah, I mean, look at anyone's kids, okay? When I grew up, my paradigm of learning was all about seeking knowledge because the information wasn't there. My kids have grown up in a world where they are filtering information. So the whole method of learning is different. So that's what they're used to doing. You know, they're doing 5 things at once. I mean, we're probably doing it, we do it, but just not as well as a 5-year-old nowadays.
Now
Well,
the future is how can I connect with more people in different places at the same time and transact, basically.
Yeah, and but you know what, VR, I mean, when we did Terra at the beginning, it was VR and Metaverse and NFTs. Metaverse is where you live and it's your house. The NFTs are the items in your house, and VR is what will make it real. And if you've seen, and people aren't even, the technology is not there yet, but if you look at where it's come in the last 3 years, 3 years ago, you needed a massive PC, you needed wires, you had to hold things in your hands. Now you can buy something for a few $100, put on your head, and you do nothing. You are in VR. And when it gets to the point where it's this, then watch the metaverse go straight into VR. That's the next step.
Carl?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's the entry point. Again, it's the hybrid realm, right? It's that hybrid realm where we want to have that experience in that world for various reasons. I think when I look at the absorption of information, we're restricted in terms of how much we can absorb in an amount of time, right? So if you start to learn whatever it may be for whatever industry in a metaverse environment, I would argue that a 4-year degree in whatever course can be shrunk down because of the immersive experience that you get through that education, right? So rather than just learning a course in context, in the format that we have today, you could enter a virtual AR augmented experience, and maybe at the same time, as we said earlier, we could get a learning token credit through this, which allows us to then be more incentivized to continue to learn, because the future is, at the end of the day, you've got to have a knowledge-based economy. But what do we mean by that, right? We need to think about how quickly can we upskill the current workforce to work with the future workforce. Can't have two islands. They need to connect. And so, you know, metaverse learning experiences are going to be a key way of bridging that divide. And VR technology has already accelerated. I interviewed Jack McCauley, who was one of the engineering backbones for the Oculus technology, which was brought up by Facebook. About 6 months ago, we did a fireside chat. And, you know, he was talking about it. It's, at the end of the day, that evolution is being driven by gamification and the metaverse, these two areas. And everything that Jawad's sort of doing with Terra Virtua and the portfolio companies that he's engaged with, and all of the experiences that our kids are bringing into this world. We talked a little bit earlier about Axie Infinity and Play to Earn. I mean, I know a 12-year-old who's set up his own teams around the world with players from Eastern Europe, you know, in Asia, and he's employing them.
Yeah.
He's got his own little business and he's employing them. And what's interesting with this is that you start to realize that, do you really need to go do a 4-year MBA? Maybe you'll learn a lot more through this experience. And rather than doing a 4-year MBA, you maybe do a 20-month, very narrowed version of that, but you'll learn it through the metaverse. And then you can also bring in, it's really exciting. There's so many things. I'm just scratching the surface, really.
Is this going to impact, let's say, the real life business space, office type of thing? How far are we from doing most of our work through VR with our clients, with prospects, with people? Are we going to be saying, instead of come to my office, let's meet in this metaverse experience through, VR? And how far are we from that?
Working in crypto, Carl, do you want to?
Go for it, mate. I'll jump after you.
Okay. Working in this space, I mean, we're very, very used to decentralized teams working 24/7. And what the main thing that changes really when you have globalization like this is that one of the biggest things that people don't really clock onto a lot of the time is that you need to become more comfortable with asynchronous conversations, because people are in multiple different time zones. And when you become truly global, rather than waiting and scheduling and everyone's sitting at 11 o'clock, people are becoming more and more comfortable in having, like, let's say, a WhatsApp conversation or a narrative where you aren't all there at the same time, sitting around a room. In fact, a massive amount of inefficiency in non-crypto companies who've all gone this route is that how many people do you know where you actually all wait for 4 days before you can get everyone together to have a conversation? And if you're a crypto company, you've already had it on a chat conversation and moved on, because people wait to be in a room before they can make a decision. And so I think you're going to see that. And I do think that you're going to see VR when it's truly portable like this, then it will be more interactive. But we're social animals. And fundamentally, our go-to is always going to be face-to-face, having a shisha, having a meal, having physical interaction. And everything else is a second-tier experience, I think, which means more to other people, and there could be a generation where it will be more important. But certainly growing up the way I have, it's never going to be a substitute. But then you could ask a 10-year-old and might have a different view. It's all very subjective.
Carl?
Totally agree there. Look, I'm obviously at the Capital Club. It's a nerve center for public sector, private sector dialogue, right? So you still have to have that physical interaction that happens there. But what happens is the follow-ups. When you start to think of the follow-ups and those experiences, and the audience being a greater audience, you start to bring in opportunities for participation from many levels from around the world. So I don't think we'll ever lose. We're never going to lose the meet and greet, working, getting together to interact and collaborate. But if anything that we've learned over the last 20 months or 2 years with the pandemic is that remote working is highly efficient when needed. And I think the technologies have always been there. I mean, obviously we're here in Dubai, we're all on Zoom, but the point is that we have to become more efficient in how we use this versus this other world, which we have to allocate some time for it. But whether I want to go watch a movie with my brothers and sisters in Sydney, while I'm sitting here, and we're all in the Oculus world, and we're sitting in a cinema in Vox Cinemas together, and and if you haven't already tried it, I highly recommend you guys go and try it. The Oculus and visiting a VR experience and going to a cinema while you're at home, that's pretty interesting. And you apply that to work, but it's not going to defeat what we're already doing. And I think ultimately that's business opportunities will grow. The opportunity to sort of collaborate across multiple ecosystems will grow. The young generation will become more immersive in this. You may have, that's one thing we probably have missed out on, is the fact that the young generation are also becoming decision makers when you're talking about DAO. So now you start to see they're being heard, but they're also, they're also voting through those.
Lee saying, will we be holding the next one, the webinars in the metaverse? I think, yeah, that's the future. Instead of this 2D kind of dimensional, we're going to be in a 3D world sharing all these thoughts.
I'll go straight there now. There I am.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And honestly, we have spaces in Terra Virtua, which we're going to be launching our new version of our metaverse in June. So maybe we can host our next version there. You'll have avatars, and let's do it in that.
We have 7 minutes left. Actually 6 now. Just turned to 14:54. Couple of more questions. Why did Facebook drop 25% in a day last week? I've been following some of the pricing of some of the other tech companies involved in the metaverse, people like Matterport, who were supposed to be building the 3D worlds of the worlds, and then Unity Software as well. I mean, we've seen Matterport dropped 60% in the last 2 months, I think. What's happening to some of these tech companies?
Who knows why the market does anything? You know, like people ask these questions, and it's always like, really?
Yeah.
How do you know? Just why is the stock of Tesla so high? Why is this? You know, you just don't know. There's so many variables, and what you have seen at the beginning of the year is that there's been so much of a drop, and just like the drops happen in the real world on the stock exchange, they get magnified in crypto just as the gains do. And so, and also what tends to happen is that because so much comes out, fatigue sets in with investors and retail investors as well. But like, you can never quantify it. I mean, we have a token, and if anyone asks me what's going to happen to it, I just can't tell them, because you can have one behavior, do one thing one day, but there's 1,000 other external factors which will change it. So if anyone wants to invest, I said, just take your own advice, because you just don't know.
I think the one word you probably want to take out is learn the word hodl.
Absolutely.
because really,
life.
there are cycles, right? There are cycles. Facebook specifically, I mean, you could argue that they dropped because their social user base dropped slightly. But, you know, ultimately, when you're pivoting an organization, you're going to have to expect these changes. The future is the key. So you start thinking the future is AI, the future is digital economy. If you're not playing in that space, relevance is going to be a problem. So who's building the pipes? Who's building all of these fundamentals? When I look, that's right. And I think, you know, and you still need to eat, you still need to drink, you still need to. So as humans, we make investment decisions based on those various. We need to be thinking of those things. Whichever entity succeeds is going to be driven by market adoption. And where, you know, right now that we're in we're in an inflation bubble, if you want to put it that way. I wouldn't say hyper bubble, but let's just say, you know, that has its own mechanisms, and regardless, we all agree tech is going to be at the heart of the future economy. So how that works and who's going to lead is going to be based on who actually pivots the fastest, but also embraces what we're already talking about today.
We have people asking for your Twitter accounts and LinkedIn accounts and so on. If you want to share any links or anything at this point,
I'll share some links
on the chat function so that people can connect with you and follow you and understand a little bit more of the work that you do. And maybe to finalize for today, gentlemen, what would be your sort of final comments for people watching this webinar session? Carl, maybe your final comments for today.
I think first and foremost, embrace what's happening, embrace it and engage in it. And I think the way you engage is you start with the fundamentals and just start learning, and you start with just very small steps to engage in this. And it could be simply just to set up a couple of these accounts, whether it's in, obviously in terms of the crypto world, but even on the NFT exchanges, whether it's in Metaverse or OpenSeas, and just get a feel for what's going on, but learn and embrace it. The other thing I would say is forget this world of titles and roles that you currently have in terms of what that is today, and that's going to be defining you in the future. I mean, you all have skills which are going to be needed in this future digital economy, or I'd say the digital economy today, which is evolving. Start to think about how creative can you be to bring those experiences into that world, because it's going to be needed. And so, you know, and embrace it, right? We're human beings. We have an innovation DNA. So therefore, we are creative by nature. We solve problems by nature, and use that to your advantage in whatever market that you're engaging in. Expect and embrace change. That's it.
Excellent.
Yeah. And you know, one thing I would say is the UAE is really driving forward in terms of pushing crypto and blockchain and adoption. And they, as Dubai always does, and this is one of the reasons we're all here, they're embracing something new and they're just pushing forward. And there's a reason for that. You know, look around you. I mean, I've been here for 16 years. I know people here for 30 years. This is a transformation that's unrivaled anywhere else in the world. And they're absolutely backing this. So if the government is following this and the world is going in that direction too, I'd say don't be skeptical of it and don't treat it as a fad, because it's really here to stay. And if you have any doubt, go ask a 10-year-old what they think about this world.
Spot on.
People tend to think sometimes, what can I do from a country like the UAE? Although we are at the forefront of so many things, how can we compete with superpowers of the US when it comes to building this kind of technologies? Is this a misconception? Can people from the UAE move the needle in this space going forward?
Lead.
Wearing the CTO, so wearing my CTO hat, every time there's been a paradigm shift in technology, new countries have surfaced as the leaders. Before mobile applications came out, who the hell knew about app developers in Finland? You just didn't. But yet the biggest games in the world are driven by that. Every time there's a technology shift, you find one country or a few countries start rising because they embrace it first. And there's nothing stopping that happening in the UAE. I mean, places like Pakistan and India and the UAE, they're innovating, like countries that have been used as commodities historically, like my parents came from Pakistan, and people in Pakistan traditionally, they were like just being nameless faces creating something for a Western organization. But now they should be proud of where they came from and show in their talent and innovation what they can do in a way they don't need to hide their identity anymore. And I think you're going to see that. And the UAE, absolutely. There's nothing stopping good tech, only minds drive tech.
I'll leave this thought, everything I agree with there, Jawad. The world of the future digital economy, net export solutions will be born out of here in these markets, specifically UAE is trying to thrive with that. This will become a net export hub of the digital economy solutions of the future. This is what's going to happen because regulation is so far behind and so far behind it in terms of pushing it through and wanting it to succeed. I mean, they've made those announcements. This country wants to be set as a knowledge-based economy and a digital economy. It's got a minister of AI. Which country in the world has a minister of AI and digital economy? I think I start thinking about it. So I think totally, and I think when you follow where global investment funds are now turning their lens, it's to the emerging markets. And the population of the emerging markets, as I mentioned, the 8 billion people on Earth, 4 billion are offline. Yeah, we can see the opportunity. It's here, and this is where you will grow.
Excellent. Well, Carl, Jawad, thank you so much for today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the attendees. I think this was a very informative and lots of value, and I think we got to understand a little bit where this is going. We're going to be sharing the full link and video with everybody that took part of today, and we'll be attaching a few documents. I think, Carl, you were talking about some white paper you were referring to. Maybe we can send a few links together with this email to everybody. But thanks again to everybody, to the attendees. Thank you for joining us. We had about 200 people connected. Carl, Jawad, thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Bye.
Goodbye.